Brian Gallant is the former Premier of New Brunswick, and we're happy to have him part of our coverage here as we track this story closely. Brian, always good to see you. You know, you're listening to, Wob Canoe there, Danielle Smith, as well as others trying to figure out, what the path forward is here. What are your takeaways from what you're hearing and seeing?
It's great to be with you. And are we ever in a complicated time, uncertain time? And the premiers with the Prime Minister are trying to figure this out during their summit. And for context, the premiers were going to be getting together for their annual meeting, and the Prime Minister joined. And look, what I read from all of it is that the Trump administration has been put on notice that Canadians are going to be united. And the premiers, the Prime Minister and his government, I believe, sent that message today. I think that's the biggest outcome from the summit. It is clear because you see the premiers, as you mentioned, Todd, come out and say, look, we're not rushed. If it's going to take more time, we're not going to just accept any deal, meaning we're not just going to accept all the terms that the Trump administration would be putting on the table in these last few days before the August 1st self-imposed deadline. So to me, that's strong, and it's a good message. It's the right message, and I'm very happy, pleased to see the premiers and the Prime Minister stay united, despite the fact that there are many political parties represented in the group of 14. So I think that's the number one outcome from these meetings. And I think it's also putting Canadians on notice that indeed we may have some more uncertainty. Now, to put in context, as Premier Smith and Canoe were saying, the idea that CUSMA would only be renegotiated later on wouldn't necessarily be a bad thing because CUSMA was ultimately a mutually beneficial deal for both countries. In fact, it was renegotiated by Trump himself. So if that is the case, and we basically respect CUSMA, that could be a bit of a win as long as we see everything that's not CUSMA compliant. We have some type of arrangement, as Premier Smith was alluding to. So that could be an outcome that would be positive for the Canadian economy for the next few months while we maybe get to the renegotiation later on.
Hey, Brian, blunt question for you. Talk is one thing, but can Canada actually afford to walk away from a so-called bad deal, knowing full well that if we walk, that could trigger even more aggression by Trump?
Well, it's a tricky question because technically, no, we can't, but at the same time, neither can the U.S., right? I mean, this is the most mutually beneficial economic arrangement between two countries, most likely in history. And the U.S. need us as well. So there is no doubt a bit of this that is about negotiating. It's about, I think, Premier Ford, the chair of the Council of Federation, during the summits, was essentially saying we got to use force because that's the only thing he understands, which I tend to agree with. We have to be firm. I don't think we have to get into the rhetoric like the Trump administration and Trump more specifically himself gets into. And I think Carney has done a good job of avoiding that. But we got to stay firm. And if we just accept any type of deal, if it's a bad one, those will be repercussions, economically speaking, for many years to come as well. If the idea is that we push back, we're firm on some of the things that might be the sticking points at this late stage of the negotiations, and that means that CUSMA still stays, that maybe there's some type of arrangement on the other sort of sectorial things, which represents about 5–10% of trade, economists would tell us. That, I think, is not a bad scenario given all of the context and circumstances. So it's a nuanced answer to your very blunt question, Todd, but I think that is what we need to do.
We want to bring up some of the information, Brian, and I appreciate you may have not had time to look at all of it, but you do know that Donald Trump, in a big sort of, a theatrical news conference announcing, a major deal with Japan. We brought the numbers up here, and basically the Japanese are going to be facing a 15% tariff on most of their products, and our graphic says down from 25%. So people at home will be excused if they think, ooh, the Japanese got a good deal. The reality is they actually were paying something like 2 or 3% before Donald Trump. Now they're going to be paying 15. So you're talking about 4 or 5 times what they were paying, back in January. So this is going to be very difficult for the Japanese economy. Maybe it's the best that they could hope for now. The car tariffs will drop down a little bit, but their steel and aluminum still stays at 50%. I mean, is this what Canada might be looking at, Brian, where, there's a baseline tariff for Canada of 10 or 15%? And that's it. And the answer from Washington is take it or leave it.
Perhaps. Look, a few things. So I think the first thing I would sort of underline is everybody that has a trade agreement with the U.S. having some type of substantial change like you demonstrated there with Japan and US's trade, that's consequential. There's no question. But we are, I think, really in a category of our own because our economies are so embedded. We are so ingrained with each other economically, trade-wise, and security-wise that we sort of are in a class of our own. So I certainly would like to think that because of that, yes, the consequences are all that much more dire for us, but also for the U.S. And we may need to use force, be firm, and ensure that we demonstrate to Trump that we're not going to just be rolled over, to use the term Premier Ford used. But at the same time, we also have to be very realistic and have to realize that if we do that, it could mean some tough times ahead. Hence why I do also appreciate the premiers and the prime minister discussing what we can do, what is in our control as a country to be able to sort of mitigate the negative economic impacts of this uncertainty with the U.S. and internal trade barriers coming down, looking at major projects is certainly some things that we control as Canadians. And hopefully we're going to be able to see over the months to come some real action with regards to getting that in order, because that can help offset any negative impact from the uncertainty with the trade conflict with the U.S.
Brian Gallant joining us, former Premier of New Brunswick. Hey, great to see you, Brian. Thanks for this today. We'll talk soon.
Thanks for having me, Todd.